Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander into a world that feels like a nightmare dressed in wool cloaks and candle smoke. The world of medieval medicine. You're lying there, safe and cozy in bed. But imagine this. Centuries ago, if you had a toothache, someone might have recommended rinsing your mouth with a stranger's urine. If you broke your leg, they might pack it with animal droppings. Your nose is already wrinkling, right? Don't worry, you're not really there. But if you were, you'd definitely think, I wouldn't last a single day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love it if you commented with your location and the time where you are. I'm always curious where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step slowly through a crooked street where the cobblestones glisten with something you'd rather not identify. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and a sharp tang that makes you wonder if someone emptied a chamber pot just around the corner. Lanterns swing above doorways, painting yellow patches on the night. As you move closer, you notice a small wooden sign creaking in the wind. Apothecary. Inside, a glow of tallow candles lures you like the promise of warmth, even though you already suspect you'll regret crossing the threshold. The shop is crowded with shelves stacked to the ceiling. Jars hold cloudy liquids in every shade of brown and gold. You hear faint scratching. The apothecary is bent over a table, writing notes with a quill dipped in something so dark it looks more like tar than ink. He looks up, his face pale, his eyes rimmed with red from nights without sleep. He gestures toward the jars with a pride that feels out of place. You glance down and see handwritten labels. Pig dung poultice, distilled urine, powder of burnt bones. Your stomach flips, but the apothecary speaks as if he's showing off luxury perfumes. He tells you urine, especially from a healthy young man, is excellent for cleansing wounds. He insists soot scraped from a chimney when mixed with water cures sore throats. The thought crosses your mind. This is like stepping into a medieval pharmacy that doubles as a prank shop. And yet, back then, no one was laughing. You let your eyes wander. Some jars shimmer faintly, reflecting candlelight, and for a moment, they look almost beautiful, like amber glass decorations. But then you remind yourself, that beauty is deceiving. It's liquid filth preserved as medicine. Your modern brain can't help but protest. If I asked for cough syrup, they'd probably hand me something I'd normally flush down the toilet. You think? The apothecary senses your hesitation. He pulls down a small clay container, pops open the lid, and waves it beneath your nose. The odor hits you like walking past a garbage truck in summer. You reel back, eyes watering, but he chuckles softly. He claims this mixture, ashes, wine, and a trace of excrement, can soothe fevers. It's like someone offering you a warm cup of tea, except the tea bag was, well, let's just say you wouldn't want to dunk it in your mug. Still, in his world, these remedies were not jokes. To him, the human body was ruled by the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness came when those humors were out of balance. And what better way, he argues, to restore balance than with the very waste the body produced? In a strange circular logic, what went out could also heal when brought back in. You can almost hear the sales pitch. Trust me, it's all natural, locally sourced, and fully organic. Behind you, A small group shuffles in, peasants clutching children with rashes, a woman cradling a swollen hand. They line up, desperate, eyes wide with hope. You realize that to them, this dingy shop is as close to hope as they can afford. Doctors of the wealthy might prescribe gold leaf or rare spices, but here soot and urine are medicines within reach. Cheap, abundant, and, at least in theory, effective. The apothecary prepares a concoction for the woman with the swollen hand. He mixes powdered charcoal, pig fat, and what looks suspiciously like manure. He presses it into a paste and wraps it with linen. She thanks him as though he handed her a treasure chest. You stand frozen, torn between disbelief and awe. The strangest part is that sometimes these remedies did have some effect. Charcoal absorbs toxins, fats soothe skin, even urine can disinfect in a limited way. The line between superstition and science is blurry here, shimmering like candlelight on glass jars. You take a step further into the shop. At the back, shelves sag beneath the weight of dried plants, bundles of herbs, and something far less recognizable. Small animal skulls, cracked and brittle. They sit beside bottles filled with thick sludge. The apothecary catches you staring. With a sly smile, he says these are remedies for headaches and melancholy, powdered bones to bring strength, ground soot to chase away dark moods. You can't help but wonder, was that cure for melancholy? Or a recipe for giving someone an even darker mood? A cat brushes against your leg, startling you. It prowls across the counter, knocks a tiny vial onto the floor, and you flinch as it shatters. The smell that escapes is unbearable, like rotten eggs wrapped in moldy cheese. The apothecary sighs as though he's lost something precious. He mutters that it was a rare concoction, meant to cure night terrors. You bite back a laugh. If inhaling that stench doesn't cause nightmares, maybe nothing will. Still, you realize something important. For all its absurdity, this place represents the genuine human attempt to fight illness, to push back against the inevitable. It's desperate, yes, but it's also resourceful. Waste became medicine because waste was everywhere, free, and in their eyes, infused with the same mysterious forces that animated life. You think about modern pharmacy aisles with neat rows of cough syrup and vitamins. Then you glance at the shelves here, urine jars lined up like soda bottles, and you realize history is basically a very long experiment in trial and error. Some historians still debate how effective these waste-based remedies were. Were they truly healing, or just elaborate placebos dressed up in foul odors? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. For now, you step carefully around a pile of straw near the doorway, already feeling the weight of centuries pressing in. You know this is only the beginning of your walk through a world where medicine smells less like lavender and more like the alley behind a tavern. You push the door of the apothecary closed behind you, but the smell clings stubbornly, as though it has hooked itself into your clothes and refuses to let go. You shake your shoulders, take in the cold night air, and keep walking. Cobblestones glisten with moonlight, and somewhere in the distance, you hear the sound of church bells fading into silence. The street is almost empty, except for one figure leaning against a wall, a physician in a long dark robe, the hem frayed from dragging through mud. He straightens when he sees you, eyes sharp, lips curled in the half smile of someone who thinks he knows something you don't. He beckons you closer and lowers his voice. He speaks of golden remedies, liquids that shimmer faintly when caught in torchlight. You follow him reluctantly into a small courtyard where a wooden table is set with clay bowls and a jug that sloshes with an amber glow. At first glance, you might think it's mead or beer, but his expression is too serious for that. He pours a small amount into a cup, holds it aloft, and declares, "The finest medicine our bodies can produce, urine." Your nose wrinkles before you even taste the air above the cup. You imagine some medieval marketing slogan, fresh from the source, guaranteed authentic. The physician explains that urine carries within it the balance of humors. Too much heat in the body? Urine can cool it. Too much cold? It can spark warmth. To him, it is both diagnosis and cure. Physicians of his time studied the color, smell, even the bubbles in urine to decide whether someone was ill. It was like an early, very unpleasant version of a home testing kit, one that no one would want to keep in their bathroom cabinet today. He dips a finger into the cup and touches it to his lips, grimacing but not flinching. You stare in disbelief, half waiting for him to wink and admit it's just watered down cider. But no, he's utterly convinced. He insists urine can clean wounds better than water. It is sterile when fresh, he argues, and you almost mutter, "Well, technically you're not wrong." But then he continues, explaining how patients were sometimes encouraged to drink their own as a tonic. That's when you nearly lose your composure, imagining a medieval self-care routine, chamomile tea, scented candles, and a goblet of, well, you know. You glance around the courtyard. On a bench nearby, a young squire sits with a bandaged hand. The physician kneels before him, unwraps the cloth, and you see a nasty cut along the palm. Instead of reaching for clean water or wine, the doctor picks up his golden jug and pours the contents slowly over the wound. The squire bites his lip, but doesn't cry out, perhaps too used to discomfort. The liquid trickles down, washing away dirt, and to your surprise, the wound does look cleaner afterward. You realize that in an age without antiseptics, urine might actually have been one of the few accessible disinfectants. Still, the doctor takes it further. He dips a rag into the liquid and presses it firmly to the wound, binding it again with strips of linen. He assures the squire that healing will come swiftly now. You can't help but picture modern sports trainers handing out water bottles, while this medieval medic proudly distributes flasks of something far less refreshing. The comparison makes you chuckle softly. The physician straightens and speaks of humoral theory again. How every illness reflects imbalance. He pulls from his robe a small parchment with crude diagrams, bodies mapped like weather charts, arrows showing flows of hot, cold, wet, dry. He explains that urine, carrying traces of all these qualities, can restore harmony if used wisely. Some healers swore by it for treating jaundice, others for quenching fevers. In some towns, morning urine was considered the purest, like catching sunlight in liquid form. You stifle a laugh, imagining medieval villagers lining up with pitchers at dawn like coffee drinkers today. As he lectures, a few villagers approach hesitantly. One brings a child coughing weakly. The physician kneels, feels the boy's forehead, then, without hesitation, hands the mother a small vial. She bows deeply, grateful, and leaves quickly, clutching it like medicine worth more than silver. You stand stunned. For her, this isn't a joke. This is survival. A breeze rustles through the courtyard, carrying the mingled smells of herbs, wood smoke, and the sharp tang of the jug. You glance at the stars above, wondering how many countless lives, once hinged on such unlikely cures. Some historians still argue about the effectiveness of urine in medieval medicine. Was it genuinely helpful for disinfecting, or was the benefit exaggerated by desperate people clinging to any remedy available? The debate remains, and the answer isn't clear-cut. You shift uneasily, realizing how easily faith in such remedies spread. Imagine being ill in an age with no antibiotics, no sterile hospitals, no clean syringes. Every fever could mean death, every cut a risk of infection. And here was something the body already produced: free, immediate, and strangely symbolic. To drink it or bathe in it was, in their minds, to recycle health itself. You shake your head, amazed and horrified in equal measure. The physician leans closer now, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He confesses that nobles sometimes paid handsomely for the urine of the young and healthy, believing it carried vitality. The wealthier the donor, the better the cure. You imagine awkward conversations. "Excuse me, my lord, but could you spare a bottle?" The thought makes you grin in the flickering torchlight. The squire thanks the doctor and leaves, his hand bound, his steps lighter than before. The courtyard empties, leaving you alone with the physician. He gathers his notes, tucks the jug under his arm, and vanishes into the shadows. You stand still for a moment, letting the night quiet settle back in. The bells in the distance toll again, and you sense that your journey is only just beginning, that this was just one golden drop in the flood of strange cures you're about to encounter. You continue along the damp street, the physician's footsteps fading behind you, but his golden jug still lingers in your mind, like an aftertaste you wish you could scrub away. The road curves past a row of houses leaning drunkenly against one another, their timber beams twisted and bowed. You pause before a small thatched cottage where candlelight flickers through the cracks. Inside, muffled groans reach your ears. A sick room. Curiosity draws you closer, and soon you find yourself stepping through a crooked door into the realm of a man the villagers whisper about with both awe and suspicion. The dung doctor. The room smells less like healing and more like the backside of a barn. Bundles of herbs hang overhead, but they only half-mask the stronger odor of something earthy and acrid. A low fire crackles in the hearth, and crouched beside it is the healer himself, a wiry man with hands stained dark from years of handling substances most people would avoid even with gloves. He looks up with a toothy grin, gestures for you to sit, and resumes grinding a dark paste in a mortar. The pestle squelches against the mixture, and you realize, against your better judgment, that you're watching manure being transformed into medicine. He explains proudly that dung, whether from cows, pigs, or even pigeons, is a powerful tool against fever and infection. You almost laugh at the thought of a medieval prescription. Take 2 spoonfuls of pigeon droppings and call me in the morning. Yet here, the healer is convinced he holds the secret to survival. He scoops the paste with his fingers and smears it onto a scrap of linen, then wraps it around the swollen leg of a farmer stretched out on the bed. The man winces, but does not resist. Hope makes him obedient. You glance at the walls and notice jars lined neatly along a shelf. Each is labeled with the name of the animal: cow, goat, goose, even dog. It's a collection that would make modern visitors gag, yet to the healer, it is as valuable as gold. He explains that different animals produce dung with different properties: pigeon droppings for eye infections, cow manure for drawing out heat, horse dung for mending bruises. You stifle a groan, imagining medieval pharmacy shopping aisles. Aisle 2 for poultry waste, aisle 3 for cattle byproducts. The healer turns to you and offers a demonstration. He opens a jar of dried cow dung, grinds it into powder, and sprinkles it into a clay bowl. He adds vinegar, stirs until it forms a thick sludge, then declares it a fever poultice. You politely decline when he offers to dab a little on your arm, just to feel the cooling effect. He shrugs, perhaps a little disappointed that you're not a willing test subject. As strange as it seems, there is a twisted kind of logic here. Manure, dried and mixed with other ingredients, sometimes acted as a mild antiseptic or provided heat that drew infection outward. Modern science might admit that fermentation and ammonia had some cleansing effect, though the risks of infection were just as real. You imagine villagers weighing their choices, risk the fever or risk the dung. Neither feels appealing, but one at least feels like doing something. The farmer groans softly as the healer finishes binding his leg. The dung paste steams faintly in the firelight, releasing an odor that would clear any room today. Yet the man sighs, as if the pain has dulled. Perhaps it's the pressure of the bandage, or perhaps belief itself eases suffering. You realize how much of medieval medicine was built on faith, not just in God, but in the healer's confidence. The patient believed because the healer believed, and sometimes that was enough. A child wanders into the room, rubbing her eyes. The healer pats her head and pulls a smaller jar from the shelf. He sprinkles a pinch of pigeon droppings into warm water, claiming it will help her watery eyes. You hold your breath, praying she won't drink it, but instead, he uses a cloth to dab the mixture gently along her lashes. She giggles at the tickle, unaware of the disgust twisting your stomach. The healer notices your expression and chuckles. He tells you proudly that even noble households have relied on such remedies. Dung, he insists, is nature's recycling. What the body expels still carries power. To him, it's a circle of life and death, filth and cure. You think of modern recycling bins and nearly laugh. Back then, their eco-friendly solutions were far less glamorous. Still, his words echo with a strange dignity. For centuries, manure had been part of farming life. It grew crops, fertilized fields, and, in their minds, could fertilize health as well. It wasn't just dirt to them, it was energy, transformation, and healing wrapped in odor. You glance at the fire, watching sparks drift upward, and imagine how desperate people must have been to trust so fully in remedies that make you gag just by hearing them described. Historians still argue about how widespread dung medicine really was. Were most cases exaggerated by later writers to make the Middle Ages seem barbaric, or was it truly as common as these jars suggest? The truth remains foggy, like the smoke curling from the hearth. But one thing is clear. You can't escape the reality that people used what they had, no matter how foul. The farmer dozes now, his leg bound, his breathing calmer. The healer wipes his hands, satisfied, and places the pestle back on the table. He nods at you, as if to say, "This is what survival looks like." You feel the weight of that nod, heavy with centuries of trial, error, and stubborn hope. Then he shoos you gently toward the door. The night air greets you again, cooler and cleaner than anything inside that cottage. You exhale, grateful. But you know the memory of that place will cling to you like the smell of dung itself, persistent, unforgettable, and oddly human. The chill of the night air feels like a blessing after the dung doctor's cottage, though you can't quite shake the phantom smell that clings to your memory like smoke on fabric. You rub your hands against your cloak and press forward through the crooked lanes, determined to put distance between yourself and that earthy chamber. But just as you round a corner, you hear the grinding rasp of stone against stone, a rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Drawn by curiosity, you're starting to realize curiosity is your worst habit tonight. You peer into a workshop where an apothecary's apprentice crouches over a mortar, grinding something pale and brittle into dust. At first, you think it's chalk. Then you see the fragments more clearly. Splinters of human bone, shards of skull, dull against the candlelight. A shiver runs up your spine. This isn't plaster or stone. It's powdered skull. The apprentice hums softly as he works, as though crushing fragments of the dead is no stranger than grinding peppercorns. You step closer, and the powder swirls into the air, catching the candle's glow. Drifting like ghostly smoke, a physician steps into view, robed in somber black, his hands clasped behind his back. He notices you and smiles faintly, the kind of smile that carries no warmth. He explains in calm tones that the bones of the dead, especially skulls, hold medicinal power. Ground to a fine powder, they can be mixed into wine or broth to cure headaches, nosebleeds, or even epilepsy. He speaks with such conviction that you almost forget he's describing what sounds like a recipe from a horror novel. You watch as he scoops the fine dust into a small jar, corking it carefully. He sets it beside others labeled in Latin, Pulvis crani humanum, human skull powder. He assures you that nobles pay handsomely for such remedies, believing the strength of the deceased can pass into the living. You imagine aristocrats sipping their wine, unaware or perhaps willfully ignoring that their medicine once held someone else's thoughts, someone else's laughter. You can't resist the modern thought, is this dinner or a very exclusive haunted cocktail? The physician beckons you toward a shelf lined with jars. Some contain fragments of bone, others powders of varying shades of white, gray, and yellow. He explains that different parts of the skull serve different purposes. The outer bone for nosebleeds, the inner bone for headaches, the marrow for vitality. He even claims that skull powder mixed with honey can close wounds. You feel your stomach tighten, imagining sticky, bone-flavored salves smeared across bleeding cuts. A woman enters quietly, carrying a boy whose head lolls weakly against her shoulder. She places him on a bench and begs the physician for help. The boy's limbs twitch involuntarily, his eyes rolling back. A seizure. The doctor nods solemnly. He takes a pinch of skull powder, mixes it into a goblet of red wine, and tilts it toward the child's lips. The boy swallows slowly, his mother whispering prayers under her breath. You can't help but hold your breath too, though not from reverence, from disbelief. The doctor assures the mother that the powder will absorb the child's illness, drawing it away like dust soaking up water. The mother weeps with relief, clutching his hands. You realize grimly that for her, this treatment is not grotesque, but holy. The skull of the dead is seen as a vessel of strength, a bridge between this world and the next. The dead give what little they can to heal the living. Still, the question gnaws at you. Was this medicine or ritual? Healing or superstition cloaked in solemn words? Some historians still debate whether skull remedies worked by placebo, by trace minerals, or not at all. The truth is murky, hidden beneath centuries of tradition and faith. But the image of a child drinking powdered bone is one you know will linger with you far longer than the taste of golden remedies or dung poultices. The physician, noticing your unease, tries to reassure you. He tells you that bones have been medicine for centuries. Romans once believed ground skull cured epilepsy, and Persians recommended marrow for strengthening the weak. The tradition is old, he insists, as though age alone can lend credibility. You can't help but think, well, so is toothache, but I wouldn't recommend it as a cure. As he speaks, you notice a small pile of intact skulls in the corner, waiting their turn to be crushed. Hollow eye sockets stare back at you, silent witnesses to their fate. For a moment, you feel as though you're intruding on something sacred or something profane. The line is thin, and it shifts with each word the physician speaks. The apprentice continues grinding, the rasp of stone against bone filling the silence. You realize this sound would have been common in many towns, a background hum of medieval life, like church bells or blacksmith hammers. The thought unsettles you. How ordinary the extraordinary can become when desperation makes it routine. The mother gathers her child, bowing deeply in gratitude. The physician hands her the small jar of powder, instructing her to sprinkle it into broth each night. She leaves with hope cradled in her arms, and you stand rooted, torn between skepticism and sympathy. The doctor closes his jars, brushes his hands, and meets your gaze. He tells you softly that medicine is never about comfort. It is about survival. His words hang heavy, echoing in the dim room. You realize he believes in what he does, not because it is pleasant, but because it is the only light he has in a dark world. You step back into the street, the door creaking shut behind you. The air is cool again, but now it carries the whisper of powdered bone drifting in your mind. You walk slowly, the cobblestones uneven beneath your feet, and wonder, how much of history is built on practices we would never dare, yet once seemed like salvation? You wander further along the winding road, the echoes of bone dust still clinging to your thoughts. The night feels heavier now, as though each step you take drags a little of the past along with it. Ahead, a caravan creaks into town, its wheels squealing against the stones, horses snorting clouds of steam into the cold air. Merchants spill from the wagons, their voices rising in sharp accents, their hands displaying curious goods wrapped in linen and wax. Among bolts of fabric, jars of spices, and trinkets of polished brass, one crate stands apart, guarded carefully, opened only with reverence. The crowd gathers, whispering, as the merchant unveils what looks like dark, resinous powder wrapped in tiny cloth bundles. He announces it boldly, like a man selling gold. Mummy medicine! Your stomach flips again. Powdered remains of embalmed corpses, sometimes genuine, sometimes faked with tar and bones, sold as medicine to those who could pay. You never imagined that mummified kings of Egypt, long dead in their desert tombs, would find themselves ground into dust and spooned into medieval soup bowls. Yet here you are, staring at that very trade. A wealthy nobleman steps forward, cloaked in fur. He exchanges silver coins for one of the precious packets, holding it delicately as if it were a holy relic. He insists mummy powder stops bleeding, heals wounds, and strengthens vitality. You can almost hear the sales pitch. Why settle for ordinary bone powder when you can have premium, imported, desert-aged bone. The merchant nods enthusiastically, praising the rarity, the mystery, the supposed magic of foreign lands. You watch as the nobleman unwraps his prize and tips a pinch of the dark powder into a goblet of wine. He stirs with a silver spoon and drinks solemnly, as though taking part in communion. His companions murmur their admiration. You, on the other hand, feel your throat tighten, imagining the awkward dinner conversation. Care for a second helping of farro? The merchant explains proudly that this trade has grown over decades, fueled by European fascination with the East. To medieval minds, Egypt was a land of ancient wisdom, mystery, and powerful secrets. If their medicine came from embalmed kings, surely it carried divine strength. You realize how much of medicine then was built not on evidence, but on stories, on the romance of faraway places. Exotic meant effective, no matter the reality. Nearby, a soldier approaches, his arm bandaged clumsily with stained linen. He winces as he speaks, asking for help with the bleeding wound beneath. The merchant nods to his assistant, who carefully sprinkles mummy powder into a fresh bandage. They press it firmly against the soldier's arm, tying it tightly. The soldier bites back a groan, but when he flexes his hand afterward, his eyes widen. Perhaps the bleeding has slowed. Perhaps belief has steadied him. Either way, he bows gratefully and disappears into the night. You glance around at the crowd. Some villagers look awed, others skeptical, but no one dares dismiss it outright. To them, mummy medicine carries the weight of history itself, as though time and age can distill power. You find yourself thinking of modern supplements advertised as ancient remedies. The marketing hasn't changed much, only the ingredients have. Instead of ginseng or turmeric, they had embalmed pharaohs. The merchant lowers his voice and confides that sometimes the supply ran short. Not every mummy in Egypt was so easily plundered, and demand in Europe was high. So, opportunists faked the powder, grinding ordinary corpses mixed with pitch or resin. Buyers rarely knew the difference. You shake your head, half amused, half horrified. It's like buying an authentic souvenir that was made last week in someone's shed. Except here, the souvenir is literally human remains. A scholar in the crowd scribbles notes, muttering that Galen himself might have approved, that ancient wisdom supports this practice. The merchant seizes on the words, repeating them loudly, using the scholar as free advertisement. You catch yourself smiling despite the grim subject. It seems even in medieval markets, endorsements sold the product. Imagine a medieval billboard, trusted by philosophers since antiquity. Still, not everyone is convinced. A priest steps forward, frowning, arguing that consuming the dead borders on sacrilege. He warns the crowd that tampering with corpses is an affront to God. Murmurs ripple through the villagers. Yet just as quickly, another voice counters. Surely, if God allowed such cures to exist, they must be his gift. The argument swells, then fades, unresolved. Some historians still debate this same tension today. Was mummy medicine a symbol of desperate ingenuity or of moral corruption? The merchant, unfazed, packs away his wares. He knows controversy won't kill his business. If anything, it makes it thrive. He loads the crate back into the wagon, already eyeing the next town, the next eager audience. You realize you've just witnessed one of the strangest trades of the medieval world, where commerce, medicine, and superstition all converged in one dusty jar. The caravan creaks away into the night, leaving behind only whispers and the faint smell of resin. You walk on slowly, the road stretching before you like an endless scroll of bizarre remedies yet to be unrolled. The memory of powdered farrow lingers in your mind, heavier than the scent of dung or urine. You can't help but marvel. What won't people consume if only someone tells them it will bring health? The caravan's rattling fades into the night, but the thought of powdered kings and counterfeit corpses still stirs uneasily in your chest. You try to walk it off, letting your boots tap a steady rhythm against the cobblestones. The street bends into a narrow alley where shadows stretch long, swallowing the corners. A warm glow spills from an open doorway, and you hear bubbling, hissing, the clink of glass against metal. You hesitate, then duck inside, curiosity tugging at your sleeve yet again. The room is cluttered with copper alembics, glass flasks, and iron cauldrons perched over glowing embers. The air is thick with the tang of sulfur, like rotten eggs smothered in smoke. Standing at the center is an alchemist, draped in a robe singed at the edges, his hair wild as though sparks have permanently rearranged it. He stirs a pot with a long rod, muttering words you can't quite catch, part prayer, part recipe. He looks up when you enter, eyes gleaming, and grins as though you've stumbled into a magician's secret lair. He beckons you closer, holding up a flask where crimson liquid sloshes slowly, thick as syrup. He explains with dramatic flourish that this brew contains the essence of healing, blood, sulfur, and human waste, all simmered together until their powers merge. You blink twice, thinking, this is less medicine and more the world's worst smoothie. The alchemist, however, insists that the bubbling mixture could cure plague, fevers, even melancholy. He pulls another flask from the shelf, this one cloudy and foul-smelling. He explains it's distilled urine mixed with lead filings and vinegar. According to him, the sharpness of vinegar unlocks the hidden vitality of the body's own waste. You picture a medieval infomercial. Why waste your waste? With just a pinch of alchemy, your chamber pot becomes a pharmacy. The room grows hotter as you watch him work. He sprinkles dried herbs into the cauldron, muttering that nature and filth must marry to produce true healing. Sparks leap from the fire, catching the sweat on his brow. You notice a blackened book on the table, its pages stained with brown smudges. It's filled with recipes that read like riddles. Mix dung of the red cow with ash of oak. Boil with blood until vapors cease. Some pages have been ripped out, perhaps stolen, perhaps discarded after experiments went horribly wrong. The alchemist hands you a small vial of thick, greenish liquid, urging you to inhale. Against your better judgment, you bring it close and nearly choke on the stench. Your eyes water instantly. He beams, delighted, explaining that this is the smell of purification, the odor of disease being chased away. You nod politely, wiping your eyes, but silently think, if this is healing, I'll take my chances with the fever. Behind him, a young assistant scribbles furiously on parchment, recording every ingredient, every measurement. The boy looks pale, coughing occasionally as fumes curl around him. The alchemist doesn't notice, or pretends not to. He's too lost in his pursuit, convinced that the boundary between sickness and health can be broken down, melted, and reshaped like metals in a forge. He launches into a lecture about transmutation. How just as base metals can be turned to gold, so too can the body's waste be transmuted into remedies. In his mind, alchemy isn't only about riches, it's about life itself. Disease is corruption, and corruption must be burned away, distilled, and reborn. He speaks with such conviction that you almost admire him, until he casually tosses a handful of dried feces into the pot, stirring as though adding spices to a stew. The steam that bursts forth makes you gag. A knock at the door interrupts him. A weary soldier steps in, limping, his arm wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. He begs for help. The alchemist beams, as if fortune has delivered him the perfect test subject. He carefully dips a rag into his crimson brew, wrings it out, and presses it to the wound. The soldier flinches, gritting his teeth, but remains still. Within minutes, the bleeding slows. The alchemist claps his hands, triumphant. Was it the concoction, the pressure, or simply luck? You'll never know, but the soldier bows, grateful, and hobbles out again. You stand quietly, watching as the alchemist returns to his cauldron. Eyes alight, you realize that to him, medicine and magic are indistinguishable. Blood, dung, sulfur, they're not grotesque, they're sacred ingredients in the great experiment of existence. He believes he's uncovering divine secrets, even if it means gagging on fumes and staining his hands in filth. Some historians still argue about the role of alchemists in medicine. Were they genuine healers blending early chemistry with superstition? Or were they eccentric showmen peddling dangerous potions? The debate lingers like the smoke in this room, impossible to clear completely. But as you watch him swirl another flask of glowing liquid, you realize both may be true. The alchemist presses the green vial back into your hand, smiling mysteriously. "A drop each night keeps corruption away," he says. You slip it into your pocket, not daring to taste it, but too polite to refuse. Then you step into the cool night once more, your lungs aching for fresh air. The doorway closes behind you with a thud, sealing in the hiss of bubbling pots and the smell of sulfur. The street is quiet again, but your mind is buzzing with images of boiling filth and whispered formulas. You walk on, wondering how far desperation can bend the line between science and madness, and how often the two walk hand in hand. The night feels calmer after the chaos of the alchemist's den, though you are not sure if the air truly smells fresher, or if your nose has just gone numb from sulfur and waste. You walk until the streets widen, leading to the grander quarter of town. Here, timbered houses stand straighter, banners hang from windows, and the sound of laughter echoes faintly from within. This is the world of nobles, people who can afford the finest, or at least the strangest, treatments. You pause before a large hall glowing with torchlight, and curiosity pulls you inside. The room is filled with velvet and fur, silver goblets, and the sweet smell of roasting meat. Servants bustle about, carrying trays of food and pitchers of wine. At the head of the long oak table sits a nobleman, his face ruddy, his belly round. Around him, other courtiers lean in, their rings gleaming, their laughter smooth. And yet, beside the roasted pheasants and sugared fruits, you notice something else being served. Small golden bowls filled with thick, sticky concoctions. A physician in fine robes stands proudly at the noble's side, describing the ingredients as though reciting poetry. Honey, spices, and, he says it without flinching, animal dung. He assures the gathering that when blended with sweetness, filth is transformed into medicine fit for kings. The nobles nod thoughtfully, as if this were no stranger than adding cinnamon to their wine. You nearly choke just watching them lift their spoons. The Lord himself raises his bowl with great ceremony. He explains, almost boastfully, that he drinks this mixture to strengthen his stomach, to ward off fevers, and to keep his humors balanced. The honey masks the bitterness, he insists. You think to yourself, yeah, honey also masks the taste of cough syrup, but at least cough syrup doesn't come from a stable floor. He swallows deeply, smacks his lips, and proclaims it marvelous. The courtiers follow his lead, each taking cautious sips, their faces betraying to you just the slightest hesitation. The physician presents another royal treatment, wine infused with powdered bones, resin, and sometimes even urine. He claims the concoction purifies the blood, improves memory, and preserves youth. The nobles listen intently, eager for anything that promises health, or at least the appearance of it. You watch them raise their goblets, the candlelight flickering on their jeweled hands, and wonder how many were convinced by faith, and how many just feared appearing foolish by refusing. A servant enters with a tray carrying a smaller cup, reserved for the lady of the house. Her face is pale, her hands tremble slightly as she accepts it. The physician whispers that the tonic contains not only dung and honey, but also ground pearls. The combination, he swears, will calm her nerves and restore her vitality. She sips delicately, grimacing only slightly, then thanks him with quiet dignity. You can't help but think, this is basically a medieval smoothie bar, if the menu were written by a prankster. As you watch, you realize that for nobles, medicine was as much about spectacle as survival. It wasn't enough to take a simple herb or poultice. Their remedies had to be rare, exotic, or shockingly strange, proof of their wealth and their access to hidden knowledge. To drink a concoction of honey and dung wasn't just about health. It was about displaying courage, sophistication, even piety. After all, if kings endured foul-tasting medicine, surely lesser folk should as well. The physician continues his performance, describing how emperors once relied on such tonics, how saints endured them in acts of devotion. He sprinkles references to antiquity like seasoning, assuring the court that they are partaking in a noble tradition stretching back centuries. You notice the courtiers nod more vigorously, clinging to the reassurance that they are following in great footsteps. It feels less like medicine and more like theater, an elaborate stage play with goblets and grimaces. Still, the room carries an undercurrent of hope. For all their wealth, these nobles fear illness as much as the peasants outside. Plague spares no one. Fever cuts across classes. And so, when faced with sickness, they too turn to remedies that blur the line between courage and absurdity. You wonder if, beneath their jeweled collars, some of them whisper the same doubts you feel now. Historians still debate whether such treatments ever truly worked, or if nobles were simply willing participants in a grand illusion. Perhaps the honey did soothe, the wine did disinfect, the resin did heal, at least a little. Or perhaps the power was all in the belief, magnified by ritual and luxury. The truth, like the taste of these remedies, is difficult to swallow. The feast winds down. Servants clear the bowls, scraping the last sticky traces into buckets. The nobles lean back, satisfied, murmuring about the strength they already feel, coursing through them. You watch quietly, amused and unsettled in equal measure. For once, you think, dung wasn't just a peasant's cure. It was served on golden dishes to the mighty. You slip back into the night, the laughter and clinking goblets fading behind you. The street feels colder now, emptier, as though the world itself has paused to digest what you've just witnessed. You walk on, shaking your head with a faint smile, wondering how many royal secrets were really just recipes no kitchen maid would ever admit to tasting. The noble hall fades behind you, its laughter muffled by the distance, and you find yourself once more among the narrow cottages of the common folk. The road dips into a quieter part of town, where the air carries softer sounds: babies crying, dogs barking, the rustle of straw in stables. A single window glows faintly, and from within comes the low hum of a woman's voice, steady and soothing. You step closer and realize you've wandered into the world of village healers, midwives, wise women, the ones who guided life into the world, and when they could ease the pain that followed. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by a stub of candle and the red warmth of a hearth. A woman sits on a stool, her hair streaked with gray, her hands steady despite the tremor of years. At her feet lies a young mother, clutching her swollen belly, sweat shining on her brow. The midwife moves with calm authority, mixing a paste in a wooden bowl. You lean closer and catch a whiff of something unmistakable: manure. The midwife doesn't flinch. She stirs the paste with herbs and vinegar, her motions sure, as though this recipe has been passed down for generations. She spreads the mixture onto a strip of cloth, murmuring softly that it will ease the pain of childbirth. To your modern ears, it sounds impossible, unthinkable even. Yet here, in this small cottage, surrounded by the desperation of labor, it feels like hope. The young mother cries out as another contraction ripples through her. The midwife presses the poultice gently against her abdomen, tying it in place with strips of linen. The room fills with the earthy smell of manure, mingled with rosemary and smoke. You wrinkle your nose, but the mother relaxes just a little, her breathing slowing. Whether from the warmth, the pressure, or sheer belief, some relief has found her. The midwife whispers stories as she works. She tells of women who survived fever because cow dung poultices drew out the heat, of infants soothed by pastes of goose droppings mixed with milk. She says waste holds energy, and when balanced with herbs, it can carry away suffering. To her, manure isn't filth. It's part of the cycle of life, the same way it nourishes fields. You can't help but imagine a medieval midwife's manual with recipes that read like twisted cooking instructions. 1 spoon of dung, 2 of vinegar, stir until smooth, apply with faith. In the corner, a small child watches, wide-eyed. He clutches a doll made of rags, mimicking the midwife's motions with his toy, as though already learning the craft. You smile faintly at the innocence of it, even as your stomach protests the ingredients. For the villagers, there is no pharmacy aisle, no clean hospital. There is only what the land and the body itself provide. The midwife wipes her hands on her apron and leans close to the mother, whispering encouragement. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Then, with a final cry, the child arrives, wriggling and loud, filling the room with new life. The midwife works quickly, wrapping the baby in cloth, cutting the cord with a sharpened blade. She dabs a small poultice of herbs, yes, and a trace of manure onto the stump, declaring it protection against infection. You shudder, but the mother weeps with joy, clutching her child. You realize you've witnessed something raw, something that blends the sacred and the ordinary. Birth, surrounded by filth and faith, pain and hope. The midwife's remedies may seem absurd to you, but in this world, they are woven into the very fabric of survival. Without them, countless mothers and children would have faced even greater danger. Some historians still argue whether manure poultices truly eased pain, or whether their power lay only in belief. Perhaps the warmth of fermentation helped relax muscles. Perhaps the herbs masked the odor enough to comfort. Or perhaps the real medicine was the midwife herself. The calm voice, the steady hands, the certainty that no woman faced the ordeal alone. The midwife cradles the newborn for a moment, humming softly, then places the child into the mother's arms. The mother kisses the tiny forehead, tears streaking her cheeks. The midwife smiles, weary but proud, and begins cleaning her tools. She glances at you, as though she's known you were there all along, her eyes saying, "This is the way it has always been, and the way it must be." You step back into the night, leaving the faint glow of the cottage behind. The cries of the newborn echo faintly, a reminder that life persists, no matter how strange the remedies. The air feels cooler, cleaner, but you know the memory of manure poultices will linger. You walk on, marveling at how something so foul could be bound so tightly to something so beautiful, the arrival of new life. The road out of the village bends toward the fields, and the night air carries with it a faint metallic tang, iron, blood, sweat. You follow the sound of muffled voices and clattering armor until you reach the outskirts of a battlefield. Torches flicker like stars scattered low across the ground, casting pale light over rows of wounded men lying in straw, their groans carried on the wind. The clash of steel is gone, but its echo lingers in broken bodies. Here, you step into the world of the battlefield surgeon, where urgency trumps elegance, and where even dung is pressed into service as a weapon against death. A man in a leather apron kneels beside a soldier with a deep gash across his thigh. His tools are crude, iron knives, bone saws, and clamps blackened from fire. Yet what makes your breath catch is not the instruments, but the bucket at his side, filled with a mixture that looks and smells unmistakably like animal dung. The surgeon scoops some with his bare hands, presses it directly into the wound, and binds it with linen. The soldier thrashes and cries out, but the surgeon holds firm, muttering that the filth will draw the poison out. You wince, horrified, but the surgeon is steady, efficient. He doesn't see dung as filth. He sees it as a tool, one that might slow bleeding, absorb infection, or at least keep the wound moist until the body can mend itself. You can't help but think, this is basically the medieval version of slapping duct tape on a disaster. The camp reeks of sweat, blood, smoke, and waste. Fires crackle as assistants boil water, though you suspect it's not always for cleaning, but for heating wine to pour into wounds. You notice jars of honey, vinegar, herbs, and always the buckets of dung. Soldiers lie in rows, their wounds bound in makeshift dressings. Some already sleep, feverish. Others whisper prayers, clutching rosaries slick with grime. A young archer stares at you with glassy eyes, his arm freshly bound in a bandage that leaks a dark stain. His companion explains proudly that the surgeon mixed horse dung into the poultice, claiming it would fight infection. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. Your modern mind screams septic shock, but here, belief keeps men alive long enough to keep fighting. The surgeon calls for more linen. He kneels beside another soldier whose chest wound bubbles faintly with every breath. The surgeon presses a foul-smelling paste into the gash, then packs it tight with straw. He mutters a prayer, his hand steady despite the horror before him. You realize he is not just a butcher. He is a man wrestling with death, using whatever scraps the world gives him. And if that means dung, so be it. Some soldiers look away, their faces pale, while others watch with grim fascination. One mutters that the dung pulls out the evil humors. Another swears it worked for his cousin back home. In this world, testimony is as powerful as evidence. If one man survived, others will cling to the hope that they can too. The surgeon pauses to wipe his brow, streaking sweat and blood across his face. He glances at you and says matter-of-factly, "Better to risk the stink than to let the rot win." His voice is weary, but certain. You can almost hear a modern echo. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, but at least it's a cure. The battlefield quiets as exhaustion settles. Groans turn to murmurs, murmurs to snores. The surgeon moves from one soldier to the next, never resting. His apprentices run to fetch more dung from the stables, scooping it as though collecting treasure. You shake your head, half in disbelief, half in awe. These men face death daily, yet still cling to treatments you can barely stomach. Some historians still argue whether battlefield dung poultices saved lives or caused more infections than they cured. The evidence is scattered, the stories conflicting. Perhaps in some cases, the ammonia and warmth helped. Perhaps in others, it hastened death. The truth is as muddled as the poultices themselves. But what remains clear is the desperation, the willingness to smear filth into wounds rather than surrender to fate. You turn away from the rows of soldiers, the torches flickering behind you. The night feels colder now, heavier, as though it carries the weight of their suffering. You step carefully over discarded weapons, splintered shields, and broken arrows. The echoes of groans and prayers linger in your ears long after you've left the camp. As you walk on, you realize something important. Dung, urine, bone, it all blends into a larger truth. Medicine in this world isn't about what feels right. It's about what keeps you breathing one more day, even if it means stinking of the stable or tasting the tomb. The battlefield fades behind you, though its groans echo long after the torches have dimmed. You walk along a pilgrim's road now, the dirt path lined with ruts, worn by countless bare feet in cartwheels. In the distance, you see the glow of a shrine, candles flickering like a cluster of stars against the dark. Pilgrims shuffle forward in weary lines, carrying tokens, muttering prayers. Their faces glow with equal parts exhaustion and faith. You draw closer, curious, and step into the swirl of incense, wax, and whispers. At the heart of the shrine, a table groans under the weight of relics and remedies for sale. Silver crosses and splinters of supposed saints' bones lie beside jars and powders of less holy origin. A monk in a brown robe gestures broadly, his voice rich with the rhythm of salesmanship. He offers vials of saint's blood. which you suspect is really wine dyed with rust. He sells tiny bags of ashes, claimed to be from holy fires, though they smell faintly of burnt straw. And beside these sacred trinkets sit jars of powder mixed with urine crystals, marketed as holy cures, blessed by saintly hands. A pilgrim steps forward, a woman coughing into her sleeve. The monk sprinkles a pinch of ash and urine powder into her palm and tells her to swallow it with a prayer. She does, her face twisted in determination. You can't help but think this is the medieval version of a wellness shop, half faith, half pharmacy, with a touch of mystery marketing. Nearby, another pilgrim buys a small packet of dried dung, wrapped in linen stamped with a cross. The monk assures him it comes from the stable of a holy shrine, blessed by the beasts that carried saints themselves. He insists it will protect against plague and misfortune. The man nods eagerly, clutching it as though it were armor. You imagine him tucking it under his pillow, convinced the smell itself wards off sickness. You wander further among the stalls. Here a merchant sells powders made of ground bones mixed with herbs, claiming they cure melancholy. There another offers relic ointments, made of ashes stirred into oil, used for rubbing on wounds. The line between sacred and strange blurs completely. You realize that for these pilgrims, the cure isn't only in the ingredients, but in the belief they carry with them. A group of children huddle near a reliquary, their eyes wide as they stare at a small golden case said to hold the finger of a saint. The monk explains that touching it can heal fevers, but not everyone can touch directly. So instead, he sells cloths dipped in water that once touched the relic. The cloths glisten faintly, though when you sniff one, you catch the sharp scent of ammonia. Yes, urine again, disguised under holy branding. You smile wryly, thinking, even in the medieval souvenir shop, nothing sells quite like a repackaged chamber pot. A young man presses forward with a wound on his cheek. The monk dabs it with a salve of ashes, vinegar, and, if your nose is right, a trace of dung. He blesses the man with the sign of the cross and promises healing. The pilgrim bows deeply, eyes shining, convinced he has brushed against the divine. You step back, struck by how faith transforms disgust into reverence. What you see as filth, they see as holiness woven into earthly matter. You glance up at the shrine itself. Its walls are carved with saints. Its candles flicker with warmth. Its air hums with chant. And yet, beneath all that piety, jars of ash, urine, and dung sit in neat rows, sold as extensions of heaven's power. It's both absurd and strangely beautiful, proof that desperation and devotion walk hand in hand. Some historians still debate how much of these relic remedies were genuine faith and how much were scams by clever monks and merchants. Were the powders truly from sacred sites, or simply gathered from nearby stables and hearths? The answer, like the powders themselves, is clouded. Impossible to separate clean from foul. As the pilgrims shuffle away, clutching their packets and vials, you feel a mix of sympathy and amusement. You know their journeys are long, their burdens heavy. For them, these remedies are not just cures. They are souvenirs of hope, proof they tried everything to protect themselves and their families. You wonder how many reached home, convinced they carried a piece of heaven in a jar, only to find it smelled more like the barnyard. The shrine bells toll, sending pilgrims onward down the road. You step back into the night, the hum of chant fading into silence. In your mind, the image lingers. Rows of relics, some sacred, some dubious, all offered with equal solemnity. You walk on, realizing that in this world, even the holiest journeys were lined with powders of ashes and urine, carried as treasures of faith and filth alike. The shrine bells fade behind you, their echo replaced by the softer rhythm of rustling leaves as you wander along a cloistered path. The road leads you toward a stone building nestled among gardens of herbs and fruit trees. Its walls rise sturdy and gray, its windows narrow, lit from within by a gentle glow. This is no marketplace, no battlefield. It is a monastery. You step quietly through the wooden gate, and the world shifts into the hushed, methodical life of monks. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of ink, beeswax, and drying herbs. Long tables stretch across a hall where hooded monks bend over parchment, their quills scratching steadily. Their voices murmur prayers in Latin, weaving faith into their work. But your eyes drift to the shelves, rows upon rows of thick manuscripts bound in leather, many marked with symbols of plants, animals, and strange alchemical signs. You realize you've entered the scriptorium, where knowledge itself is preserved. One monk notices you and beckons you closer. His fingers are stained not only with ink, but also with something darker, smudges that smell faintly sour. He shows you an open manuscript, its pages filled with recipes written in careful looping script. You scan the words, and your brows rise. Among the familiar drawings of herbs, there are instructions that read like something from the apothecary's shop. For fevers, mix feces of goose with vinegar. For wounds, apply paste of fermented liver and urine. You blink twice, then look at the monk, who nods solemnly as if this is wisdom passed down from the ancients. Around you, other monks copy diligently, their quills scratching out more lines about poultices of cow dung, ointment of fermented organs, and even powder of dried intestines. They do this with the same reverence one might copy scripture. To them, knowledge, no matter how foul, is holy, for it preserves the chance of life. You can't help but smile wryly. Imagine a medieval library, but instead of self-help guides, it's all just how to cook with poop, Volume 1. The monk explains softly that monasteries are not just houses of prayer. They are hospitals for the sick, sanctuaries for travelers, and keepers of healing lore. When peasants came to their doors, the monks offered remedies drawn from these very recipes. Honey and wine might mingle with feces, herbs might steep in urine. It was all recorded, copied, preserved, like treasures of the mind. You realize that these manuscripts were the medieval equivalent of medical textbooks, only with far stranger ingredient lists. He shows you another page, this one decorated with careful illustrations, a jar labeled with Latin words for dung, a drawing of a sheep's bladder, a sketch of a human skull. The artistry is beautiful, even if the subject makes your stomach twist. The contradiction strikes you. The monks copied recipes about feces with the same precision they used for psalms. You whisper to yourself, half amused, half amazed, talk about holy crap. A bell rings in the courtyard, and some monks rise, carrying jars from the infirmary. You follow curiously. In a small room, straw beds line the walls, each occupied by someone groaning or coughing. A monk kneels beside a fevered pilgrim and prepares a poultice from ingredients you already know too well: ashes, herbs, and yes, a measure of dung stirred into honey. He spreads it carefully across the man's chest, then prays softly while binding it with linen. The room smells sour, earthy, and sweet all at once, like incense gone terribly wrong. You realize something striking. These monks aren't charlatans like some market sellers. They aren't showmen like the alchemists. Their work is quiet, steady, born of duty. They believe what they do is righteous, even if it smells revolting. For them, tending the sick is a holy act, and no ingredient, no matter how base, is unworthy if it might bring comfort. Historians still argue whether monasteries were the keepers of practical medicine or simply preservers of superstition. Did their records save lives with herbs and honey? Or did they spread harmful practices by repeating dung-based remedies? The debate lingers, like incense smoke curling in vaulted ceilings. Yet, without these manuscripts, much of medieval medicine, foul or not, would have been lost entirely. As the monks continue their tasks, one slips a small jar into your hand. Inside is a paste the color of clay, smelling faintly of vinegar and manure. He whispers that it is for protection on your journey. You bow politely, though you have no intention of using it. Still, you feel a strange respect for his gesture. For him, this is not filth. It is care, distilled into a jar. You step back into the night, the monastery's bells tolling softly behind you. The air feels fresher, though the memory of ink-stained fingers and dung-stained recipes lingers. You walk on, realizing that in this world, medicine and prayer were bound by the same ink, written side by side on the same sacred page. The monastery's bells fade into the distance as you follow a dirt lane back toward the scattered cottages of the countryside. The night is quieter here, punctuated only by the croak of frogs and the occasional bark of a dog. You catch a flicker of lamplight through a farmhouse window, and curiosity pulls you closer. Inside, a family sits huddled around the hearth. Parents, children, even a grandmother wrapped in a woolen shawl. The air smells of smoke and stew, but mingled with it is another scent you've learned to recognize all too well, the tang of stored waste. On a shelf near the fire, you spot jars, clay pots sealed with wax, their contents a murky amber. One of the older children proudly explains to a younger sibling that these jars contain urine, kept for when sickness comes. The little one grimaces, but the grandmother hushes her. She insists the jars hold power to fight curses, to ward off plague, even to scare away witches. You raise your brows, half amused, half horrified. Imagine keeping a potion of good luck on your shelf, except it's literally a chamber pot with a lid. The father demonstrates how they use it. He dips a small cloth into the jar, wrings it out, and hangs it over the doorway. He explains that the strong smell repels evil spirits and sickness alike. To your modern mind, it seems like fumigation gone wildly wrong, but to them, it's protection. The younger children hold their noses and giggle. The grandmother scolds them, reminding them that nothing wards off fever better than the stench of the body's own essence. Beside the jars of urine are smaller pots filled with dry dung. The mother crumbles a handful into the fire, the smoke curling upward. She claims it purifies the air, chasing away the bad humors that cause plague. You think of modern air fresheners and nearly laugh. This is like lighting a scented candle if the scent were barnyard chic. As the fire crackles, the grandmother tells a story. She recalls when the plague swept through the village years ago. Neighbors smeared dung on their doors to confuse death, believing he would mistake their homes for stables and pass by. Some lived, some died, but the memory of those who survived convinced her that the practice worked. You shiver, not at the filth, but at the desperation woven into the tale. The children listen wide-eyed, believing every word. One clutches a small pouch of ash and dung tied with string, worn like a charm around the neck. The grandmother insists it protects against the evil eye. To you, it looks like the medieval version of a good luck bracelet, just a whole lot stinkier. Later, the family gathers at the table, and the father pulls down a jar of powdered bone mixed with herbs. He sprinkles a pinch into their stew, declaring it will strengthen their blood against sickness. The children slurp it down without hesitation, too hungry to care. You watch, both fascinated and unsettled, as superstition blends seamlessly into mealtime. Some historians still debate how much of this everyday magic was survival strategy and how much was simply fear made into ritual. Did the jars of urine truly disinfect the air? Did dung smoke repel fleas that carried plague? Or was it all coincidence? The truth is lost in smoke and memory. But what remains clear is that for these families, every jar on the shelf was both shield and prayer, as essential as bread or firewood. The grandmother finishes her tale with a knowing nod, her wrinkled face lit by the glow of the fire. She insists that waste is not waste at all. It is medicine, protection, even blessing, if used with faith. The children nod solemnly, though one sneaks a giggle when the pouch of dung slips from his neck and lands in his bowl. The room erupts in laughter, and for a moment, the weight of fear lifts. You slip back outside, leaving the family's laughter behind. The night is cool, the stars sharp above, but the smell of dung smoke clings faintly to your clothes. You walk on, realizing that superstition isn't just about strange remedies. It's about turning the unbearable into something you can hold, something you can believe in, even if that something sits on your shelf in a sealed jar, waiting for the day you need it. You walk on through the sleeping countryside, the stars bright and sharp above you, when a flicker of lamplight ahead draws you toward another gathering place. Not a shrine, not a cottage, but a hall where physicians meet. Inside, long benches creak beneath men in robes, their faces lit by the glow of oil lamps. Scrolls and manuscripts lie open, quills scratch, and voices rise and fall in earnest debate. You slip into the back, unnoticed, and listen. At the center of the room, two physicians argue passionately. One insists that waste, urine, dung, even blood, contains hidden virtues. He points to case after case, patients who improved after drinking golden water or wearing dung poultices. He slaps a parchment with conviction, declaring that filth heals because it carries the body's essence. To him, nothing the body produces is truly useless. Across the table, his rival shakes his head, scoffing. He claims waste is poison, the body's way of expelling corruption. To reintroduce it is to invite disease back inside. He raises a jar of herbs and slams it down, insisting that only plants, only clean remedies drawn from the earth are worthy of medicine. The hall buzzes with murmurs, each physician choosing sides. You can't help but imagine this as a medieval version of a science conference, minus the PowerPoint, plus a lot more shouting about poop. One side waves jars of urine like prized exhibits. The other holds up bundles of sage and rosemary like holy relics. Their voices clash, echoing in the rafters. An older scholar, his beard long and gray, rises slowly to speak. The hall hushes. He reminds them that even Galen, revered father of medicine, spoke of humors and balance, of excreta as a mirror of health. He warns that dismissing waste entirely is foolish, but so is worshiping it blindly. His voice is steady, wise, a plea for moderation. You sense that he has seen both success and tragedy in his long years of practice. The debate continues. A young physician presents a case where urine cured a festering wound. Another counters with a story of a patient who died after dung poultices worsened an infection. The stories tangle together like smoke, impossible to separate truth from embellishment. Some historians still argue about these same questions today. Were medieval waste remedies genuine precursors to antiseptics, or dangerous superstitions dressed in ritual? The answer, much like the arguments echoing here, refuses to settle. You study the faces around the hall. Some glow with conviction, others tighten with doubt. You realize these debates are more than academic. They are about survival, about whether to trust in filth or reject it, about whether hope lies in the stable or the herb garden. It strikes you that this is how medicine evolves, not in neat steps, but in messy arguments, half-truths, and stubborn faith. One physician grows frustrated and slams his fist on the table, declaring that dung poultices saved more soldiers than clean water ever did. Another scoffs, shouting that if dung were truly holy, God would have made us immortal with it. Laughter ripples, but uneasily. No one is certain. The gray-bearded scholar finally raises his hand, silencing the room. He says softly, "Medicine is not certainty. It is endurance. We try, we hope, and we write, so the next generation may do better." His words settle like dust on parchment, quieting the younger men. You feel the weight of centuries in his tone, the acknowledgement that healing is as much experiment as it is faith. The hall grows quieter. Quills scratch again. Some physicians return to their manuscripts. Others murmur in smaller groups. The great debate has not ended, but for tonight, it has cooled. You step back into the cool air, your ears still ringing with the clash of conviction. As you walk on, you realize that the line between poison and cure was never clear in this world. It shifted with every patient, every prayer, every desperate attempt. And though centuries separate you from these physicians, their arguments sound strangely familiar. Echoes of the same debates modern doctors have today about treatments unproven, experimental, or strange. The arguments of the physicians still echo in your ears as you follow the road into a quieter part of town. The streets are nearly empty now, only the occasional cat darting across your path or the flutter of an owl's wings above. But as you walk, you begin to notice something subtle. Snippets of conversation drifting from doorways, whispers from households preparing for bed. It isn't the stern tone of physicians or the solemn chants of monks. It's the murmur of ordinary folk passing down stories, superstitions, and remedies that have become as common as the bread on their tables. You pause outside a cottage where a group of neighbors sits by a hearth, sharing tales as the fire crackles. A woman tells how her grandmother once cured a stubborn cough by rubbing pig dung mixed with butter onto her chest. Another nods, swearing by pigeon droppings boiled in milk to ease sore eyes. The men chuckle, but not with mockery, with recognition. These remedies are familiar, woven into the rhythm of their lives. To them, waste isn't strange. It's simply another tool within reach. A young boy chimes in, proudly announcing that his mother keeps dried cow dung under the bed to ward off nightmares. Everyone laughs softly, but no one calls it foolish. Instead, they share more. Ashes mixed with urine spread on door frames to block witches, powdered bones scattered in fields to keep livestock healthy, dung smoke carried through rooms to chase away plague. These aren't just cures, they're shields against the unknown, passed down like lullabies. You sit quietly, listening. The firelight dances on their faces, and you realize how deeply these practices are bound to their sense of survival. In a world where death hovers constantly, plague, famine, fevers, the line between science and superstition disappears. If dung poultices worked once, even by coincidence, they became tradition. If a neighbor swore that ashes kept his family alive, that story lived on, retold by the hearth. One man pokes the fire and tells a darker tale. He remembers how, during a plague year, families smeared their walls with feces and urine, believing the smell would repel the miasma of sickness. He admits that many still died, but a few lived, and that was enough to convince the survivors. You shiver, imagining entire streets reeking of waste, each house marked by desperation disguised as protection. A girl with bright eyes leans forward, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwraps it proudly, a charm filled with ash, straw, and dried droppings. She explains that her mother gave it to her when she was sick with fever. She kept it under her pillow, and the fever passed. Her voice is confident, triumphant, as though she carries proof in her hands. You glance at the bundle and think, the medieval teddy bear, soft comfort, just with way worse stuffing. The laughter softens into quiet reflection. An old man speaks last, his voice cracked but steady. He says that remedies may fail, priests may falter, physicians may argue, but the wisdom of the household endures. Waste cures are not written in books or debated in halls. They live in stories, in memories, in the whispered advice passed from mother to daughter, father to son. His words linger, the fire crackling softly as if in agreement. Some historians still debate how long these folk practices persisted. Were they remnants of ancient ritual, or simply the stubborn traditions of villages untouched by academic learning? Records are scarce, blurred between memory and myth. Yet in households across Europe, remedies of dung, urine, and bone lived on quietly. Long after physicians began to dismiss them, the fire burns lower, shadows lengthening across the walls. The neighbors lean back, their voices fading to murmurs, their eyes heavy with sleep. You step back into the night, the air cool and still. Behind you, the hearth glows faintly through the window, a small star of warmth in the dark. As you walk on, you realize you've just witnessed not medicine as profession or faith, but medicine as folklore, stitched into the fabric of daily life, kept alive by stories and trust. And in a way, that makes it the most enduring cure of all. The road grows quieter still, the night drawing in like a heavy cloak. You've wandered from apothecaries to alchemists, from battlefield surgeons to midwives, and now the world around you feels softer, dimmer, as if your journey has brought you to the final chapter of a very long story. The cobblestones fade into dirt, and the dirt into grass. The hum of voices, the clatter of tools, the crackle of hearths, all of it melts away until only the whisper of the wind accompanies your steps. You find yourself on a hillside overlooking the town. Lanterns twinkle faintly below, scattered like fireflies, while above you the stars spill endlessly across the dark. You pause, taking in the quiet, and in that silence, the echoes of what you've seen tonight drift back. Jars of urine glowing like amber, poultices of dung steaming in firelight, powdered skulls drifting like dust, and the quiet hum of faith stitched into every foul-smelling remedy. You realize something. These cures were never really about filth alone. They were about hope. Every jar, every paste, every powder was a desperate attempt to wrestle life back from sickness. To us, they seem absurd, grotesque even. But for those who lived it, they were lifelines. In a world without antibiotics, without hospitals, without sterile tools, you used what you had. And sometimes, what you had was waste. As you stand on the hill, you feel a strange tenderness for the people who once trusted in these remedies. They weren't fools. They were survivors, grasping at any chance, however strange, to hold on a little longer. Some historians still argue whether dung poultices or urine washes truly helped. The evidence is scattered, uncertain, blurred by centuries. But whether they cured or not, they carried belief, and belief itself often eases suffering. Your mind lingers on the images of those you met, the apothecary proudly bottling soot and urine, the noble sipping honey mixed with dung as though it were fine wine, the midwife tying a manure poultice around a laboring mother, the surgeon on the battlefield packing wounds with horse dung, the grandmother telling her grandchildren that jars of urine would guard them from the plague. Each scene is strange, unsettling, even comical at times. And yet, beneath the strangeness lies something deeply human: the refusal to surrender. The night deepens, the wind softens. You imagine the voices of those people fading into the dark, their remedies becoming whispers, their stories dissolving into folklore. What seemed grotesque to you at first now feels almost gentle in memory, like faded ink on an old manuscript. Their world was full of fear and uncertainty, but also ingenuity and resilience. And maybe that's what lingers most: the reminder that human beings, across every century, will try anything to keep one another alive. You sit on the grass, letting the cool air settle over you. The stars shimmer above, patient and ancient, as though they've watched countless lives rise and fall, countless remedies tried and forgotten. Your eyelids grow heavy as you think of the monks copying recipes by candlelight, the villagers clutching charms of ash and dung, the physicians arguing endlessly about poison and cure. Their voices are fading now, softer with each breath, until they are only a hum in the background. The images blur, the smells dim, the sharp edges of memory soften into a haze. Soon it's just you, the hill, the stars, and the quiet murmur of history rocking you gently toward rest. Their strange cures, their desperate hopes, their stories, they can stay in the past. For now, you are safe in your own bed, far from dung poultices and golden remedies. So, breathe slowly. Let the night fold over you like a blanket. Let the last scraps of candlelight fade into starlight. And if your dreams wander into cobbled streets and smoky halls, don't worry. The apothecaries, the midwives, the soldiers, they're all long gone now. Their jars are empty, their books closed, their cures only shadows. All that remains is a soft whisper telling you that people have always tried to heal, no matter how strange the means. And somehow, that thought is enough to let your mind rest.